Hi everybody, J.Hamilton here with Core Resonance Colonies, and I have a guest by the name of Cathy Chapman, who has been with our first colony since the inception, and if I remember right, you were antsy to get going.
I was really antsy to get going. I was so frustrated with everybody keep asking what I thought were useless questions. Just put the thing on and let's see what happens.
So that's what we did.
And that's what we did. And because I was so antsy, the group let me go. Right, one of the first ones. I think I was number 2.
So it turns out bossy works.
Oh yeah, you know, squeaky wheel.
So tell me about your earliest experiences with the idea of the colony, contributing and participating, and what your discoveries were early on.
Well, the thing that attracted me to it was I knew that it was working on the brain. And I've done some research on the brain and read a lot of interesting stories and things. And I've done some different types of tools like holosync and stuff, which are supposed to help with the brain. And that helped me so much. And I just had an intuitive knowing that this was the next step for me. And that it was going to be very, very powerful. So the first time that I did Longview, which was 10 minutes, it was a profound change in me just immediately, because usually I go to group kind of things and then I get out as soon as I can. So like when I participate in a group gathering, like Gene Keys or some other kind of gathering like that, I am often the first one out. And I stuck around afterwards. I started talking to people and being more comfortable and wanting to actually interact with people. And that was one of the very first things that happened.
Do you remember the scale? I mean, I probably remember it best because this whole thing was kind of my projection, but it was, how do you remember wasn't the initial synchronicity, harmony, and order, and the group synergy just, you could cut it with a knife almost?
You could feel that we were all excited about what it is that was going to happen. And the group of us knew each other already.
Right.
And that helped a tremendous amount. And I think it brought us closer together in many different ways.
So we came together as a group. We were already a group. We were introduced to new ideas, and it took off.
It took off. I think the very first time that people experienced the Longview, I can't speak for everybody, but I think most of the people that I have talked to, and I haven't talked to everybody about it, they had a profound experience with the very first time they did Longview. And I was reading over my daily session log, and it was only 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, now I do it 20 or 30 minutes when I do Longview. And as I was looking over things, it's like to see the difference. Yeah, I was a therapist for 35 years. I'm still a life coach, very much involved with spirituality. I was a nun for 20 years. And so that kind of stuff is the stuff that I'm made of. Very much emotions and empathic, and those changes that occurred through all of the sessions that I've done. I've done 43 now, and I want to get to 60 because you had said, wow, changes really start after 60. So I want to get to that 60 so I can get to number 61.
Just so long as you don't think 60 is all you need.
Right.
Because I'm way over 200. I've been way over, I don't know where I am anymore.
Yeah.
I could figure it out. But 60 was the number where it started to show up.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm real excited about that, because if 60 is the number where it started to show up, when number 1 after 10 minutes, it showed up a lot.
I have to say that I was honestly surprised, because again, I write these books, I download this information, I hold on to my dreams about what I'm trying to accomplish. Suddenly the first colony forms on the Spring Equinox 4 years or later than when the 12 premises of Core Resonance Colony was finished. And all of a sudden, this thing has taken off, and it was so much stronger than I projected it might be. And I don't know if that's partly attributable to the group already being coherent, because I didn't start out with a Longview. I started out with these protocols. I did so many of them before the Longview became available. But it's interesting to see how powerfully an introduction it delivers to working with the brain, working with this introspective thing, because you do have to, you actually find there's muscles in your brain, if you will. You can actually when you're talking about the sharp protocol and the stutter is too much or it's too black, the brain actually gets tired when you give it exercises it's learning how to do. You have to, in fact, we don't want to overdo that. We don't need to be doing 30-minute protocols necessarily. But anyway, so you started with the Longview, had great success with it, and I think you were one of the early people that started moving to the Sharp protocol. Is that right?
So. Right.
I wish we had a picture. Maybe we could have a picture with your with the cap on.
I don't think so.
And I have to tell a really quick story. All of this work has been developed over a period of about since 2008, is when it really all started. I remember laying in bed with my laptop looking for a different kind of electrode system and what was available, because you use paste and these old style deals and it's gooey and whatever. I remember 8 pages in on a Google search of one of many, and wait, 8 pages you're starting to get in here. Maybe I was in there farther. I found this outfit out of Germany, but I couldn't buy from them because the FDA wouldn't allow it, and I stuck with this project, and at the last minute, all of a sudden, I could get around the FDA legally, and now I work directly with the daughter of the owner of the company, and this is different electrodes and different kind of a system. Technically, it's out of Russia, actually. And so what I envisioned for what you don't want everybody to see, the electrode cap you're wearing, it started out as a vision and became a reality, and now we're all using it, and in right timing, I might add.
And I think that your problem with getting the electrode cap and the electrodes, it had us using Sharp for a pretty good while.
Oh, that's right, we were using Sharp the old way.
We were using Sharp the old way with I'm sorry, not Sharp, Longview. We just had that right on our frontal lobes, our prefrontal lobes, and so it had us doing that more often until we were able to get the electrodes and to do that. And I'm knowing about the prefrontal cortex and learning about the brain and how sometimes some people don't have enough circulation in different parts. It affects the personality, all of those different sorts of things. I would have just been real excited to want to exercise, maybe exorcise, the different parts of the brain and see what happens. My goal for myself is to become the ultimate me, you know, the best version of me that I can be, and I know that the brain has to do that, and I'm watching what happens to me interrelationally with people and with emotions, because being a therapist, that's been my life for years. And it's been remarkable to see what happens, to see the time expansion to where I can get so much more done in a smaller period of time. And I've had some bumps in the road. Not being able to, motivation is an interesting thing, because it's either coming internally or it's coming externally. And I just had a really tough time in my business because it's me. And I have to do things, and I didn't want to do anything but watch Amazon Prime, and I had to do some work because it was almost like I didn't have the same caring level. And I don't mean that as a negative, it's that I wasn't pushed by the negativity of having to get something done or this would happen to me, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, it does, but what it looks like underneath is we give the brain exercises to cause the components of the brain to talk to each other better, so the brain becomes more whole and less fragmented. And it's not actually that we use the brain to use the brain harder. The brain is the biggest single part of the nervous system, and actually we are receivers by our very nature, as is a forest. Everything on this planet is a recipient of the cosmos, and it's what holds everything together. And humans being out of sync with that is why we're so dysfunctional.
Right.
So our job isn't so much to make our brain stronger, but what we want it to do, we want all the component parts talking to each other so it quiets down in a coherent manner such that the messaging comes in on its own. And even when you talk about too much Amazon Prime, as you quieted the nervous system, quieted the brain, the insights for getting motivated became more available.
Correct.
And it's not about making the brain more powerful and pushing the brain harder. You got all the frequencies, you want everybody talking to each other, and coherence, and it quiets down, and that subtle connection and that subtle evidence shows up, for which becomes the insights.
So when you think of all the different lobes of the brain, to get them to all communicate with each other, And I work with a particular healing modality known as body talk, and the whole purpose of that is to get all the parts of the body to communicate with each other, and to acknowledge each other, to not be pissed off at each other, and to actually work together. And I see core resonance as being able to do that with the brain, and then just having tremendous effects upon the brain and myself. And it makes me, the only way, I was looking at my daily sessions log, and the last couple of times I put, I feel like I'm more me, even though I never knew I wasn't me.
That's
You know,
right.
and it's been wonderful, and I've enjoyed what's happened. At times as I read back, I look at how, well, it's like I'm at a plateau now, but there's been all different kind. I'm not near as emotional. Yeah, I'll still get up on my high horse about things. That'll never stop. Probably not. I don't know. But I don't know what's in the future. But it's like I still.
Well, we're not supposed to turn into wallflowers.
Right.
That's not part of it.
But it's like I'm able to be detached much more. Things don't bother me quite as much. I'm able to. Actually, it was during core resonance I was able to forgive someone in one of the biggest wounds of my life. And just to let it go, and it's like, okay, that's the way he is, and this is it, and I'm okay with it. And I think back over that, and it happened in childhood, and I think back over that, and it's like, I don't have an emotional charge with it anymore. I carried an emotional charge for 60 years.
So let me touch on something really quick. The brain, for some reason, whatever the brain doesn't process, because it's in overload, it stores. And one of the things that happens is when you clean up the brain and the brain starts talking to itself better and has more horsepower, it starts to process what it once could not. And so these old wounds, these old things that could not be processed and accepted at the time they occurred and are stored, as you clean up the brain, it goes in and starts digesting those old experiences that we couldn't let go of.
And here's the and that I see, is that because when all of that works, I want to be in the present, wounds are in the past. And so by being in the present, it doesn't matter what I learned, about from the situation, what I learned about myself, others, how to relate to people. That matters, but the way it happened doesn't matter anymore, because in the present, I don't need the past. I just need what I learned from the past, and I can bring that into my present.
So one of the things that's coming up with this first colony, and we are the first colony, which is a powerful idea.
I like being first.
Right, is we're going to start moving to a couple things. One, we're going to start using humic and feeding the prefrontals, which will be really interesting. Humic's very interesting mineral. But we're also going to start using a dowsing. This is something I developed a long time ago, but I've never pulled it out. I haven't pulled it out with this crowd yet. It's called the Decider, after when George Bush was president, he said he was the decider. And so it's called the Decider. We're going to start using pendulums and dowsing to pick the protocols.
Oh, that'll be fun.
And you'll find that the dowsing alone is an introspective journey, because you make decisions based on the dowsing, and then the mind kicks in. Or if you're lucky, it doesn't. Or it doesn't. And that's the whole idea, is to learn how to not let the mind undermine what you're doing, because we want this capacity to sense out and receive back, to grow. And if you think about it, when you look out with your eyes, you are sensing out through this mechanism and you receive back. When you hear, you sense out and you receive back. Smell, you sense out and you receive back. Taste, same thing. Touch, same thing. And think about your connection with God, if you will, or the cosmos. It's a subtle sensing out, not one of these five senses, but one of these other ones. And that's what we're doing, in quieting the nervous system. We're sensing out and receiving back in a more refined manner. And we're all going to be looking intelligent after a while.
And we're all going to make it easier without trying.
That's right.
To get along with people. Because we'll be able to hold the space. While others are going crazy, it's one of the terms I use is we can be the eye of the storm. Here's all the chaos, we can be the calm within the midst of the storm.
Vibrational islands of good.
Correct.
In a sea of the old.
Correct, and that will spread out to others, so the more colonies you have, the more this will happen. And science has shown you don't need many people centered, grounded, and in their heart to make a change in the world.
So let me touch on that just for 2 seconds. You got the Maharishi effect, of course, which 4,000 meditators can influence, 400,000 people in DC, and crime went down 23.5%. But what I wanted to touch on was Dr. David Hawkins' map of consciousness, because it showed the map of consciousness 0 to 200 states of apathy, fear, grief, anxiety, rage, up through pride. 700 is where enlightenment starts. The middle is neutrality, reason, joy, satisfaction, not in that order, love, whatever. But what that scale really identifies is the lower you are on the scale, the more rigid you are, the more resistant you are. The higher you are on the scale, the less resistant you are. The less resistant you are, the more you simply have access to innate intelligence expressing. Well, the more access you have to innate intelligence expressing, the more you're partnered with innate intelligence. And when you get to 700 on the map, admittedly a high number, but what it is, less and less and less and less and less and less resistance is the same thing as more and more and more connection. And as you work your way up the scale, you become exponential. 700 on the map of consciousness is a really high number. It's not unattainable, but it's a really high number. And one person at 700 on the map counterbalances negativity of 70 million people below 200. One person at 600 counterbalances the negativity of 10 million people below 200. Imagine a group of 6, now this is not a numbers-based project, a colony, but imagine 5 or say 6 people properly, somewhere in the range of 450 or maybe 500, and being able to bump up toward 700 in a really short period of time, especially in a group effort. Group effort's not the right, it is and isn't the right word, because there's an intention we all have, but we all do our work individually, and we discover our commonalities in doing our work individually, which is ultimately we're all the same, our connection. But as we bump up the map, we become exponential in our contribution, because really what we're doing is grounding the frequency of God, or we're grounding coherence into the realm of mankind.
Or humankind.
Coherence, thank you. Coherence dissipates disorder.
See, and also what I see happening,
That's what the nervous system is for, grounding coherence into the realm of mankind.
and as we're
Humankind.
thank you. And as we tap into innate intelligence and we allow ourselves to flow with innate intelligence, then we are able to, as the colloquialism is, think outside of the box. Because when we are on the lower level and not tapped in, it is terrifying to move out of our little boundary here and to step
Little
out of
comfort.
this. And so when you're able to allow yourself to be, you discover more about yourself, you allow your intuition to flow, you let the ideas that come to you to flow, and that's where genius appears. And that's what can change the world.
What I like to say is there was a time where we used to walk through the mud puddles, and then we got conscious, and we'd go around the mud puddles, and eventually there are no mud puddles. And that is something that's available to all of us.
Yeah.
Cathy, I want to thank you for being on our program.
Delighted.
And talking with you. We always do interesting conversations.
We do.
Thank you for being here and participating.
And thank you for allowing this wonderful thing to happen and me to be part of it.
I'm so pleased. Thank you.
You're welcome.